Welcome back, friends. Welcome to the Tech Protein. I'm Dhananjay, and we are going to talk about the IP classes now. So we are on this particular topic, IP classes. So, friends, let us go back to the earlier scenario again. So, as you are aware now, IP address is of 4 fields. So friends, there are 4 different fields. Okay, so this is the first field of an IP address. You know that it is an 8-bit address now, right? So talking about the classes, okay, so IP address is now to define the type of network. A network could be a small network, it could be a medium-sized network, or it could be a very large network. So looking at the requirement, these IP addresses are divided into different classes. Okay, so we are going to talk about the IP classes. So if you want to identify the class of an IP address, you just have to look at the first field, and this first field defines, I would say, instead of defines, denotes the class of an IP address. Okay, so this is not the only parameter. There are again subnet mask that you also need to consider while understanding the class of an IP address. But for time being, to give you a basic idea, you can also identify a class looking at the first field of the IP address. So friends, this is the first field of IP address that we are talking about, and first field of an IP address denotes the class of the IP address. So before we understand the ranges, let me tell you that there are 5 classes of IP address. Okay, so class A, then the other class is class B, then the third class is class C, then we do have class D, and finally the last class of the IP address is class E. Okay, so why these classes are defined? So friends, see, when you have a network, you need to have some logic behind assigning IP addresses to computers on the network. So I'm sure that after understanding these class ranges, you will get a better clarity on what range needs to be used for what kind of network. But just for your understanding, just make a note that class ABC is used in the LAN and WAN networks. Class D are multicast addresses. So these are multicast addresses, or addresses used for multicasting. And class E is reserved. Okay, class E addresses are reserved. So there is a reason why these are reserved, but for us to understand the concept of different classes, let us first try to see what are those different classes and what is the use of these classes in day-to-day life. So friends, as you can see, class A, class B and class C are used for LAN and WAN network. So to be more precise, class A addresses are used by large networks. So generally these are used by global ISPs or ISPs. Okay, then class B addresses, these are used in medium sized networks, and class C addresses are used in small networks. Okay, we'll come to know why we call it as a large network, what is medium network, and what is a small network. So friends, I hope you got a clarity now that first three classes of the IP address are used for LAN and WAN. Class D is used for multicast addresses, and class E addresses are used as are reserved addresses, and class A is used for large networks. Class B addresses are used in medium sized networks, and class C addresses are used for small networks. So let us try and understand what are the ranges of these particular classes of IP address. So friends, now you have already built an understanding that first field of an IP address can help you identify the class in the first place, right? So, but that is not the only criteria. Going forward, you will understand the concept of subnetting, basis which you can actually define the class of an IP address. So friends, now look at the first field of the IP address, right? Consider you find a number, correct? So consider this is the first field of the IP address, and you see a number between 0 to 127. If you get to see an IP address, example 8.8.8.8, okay, you must be knowing this address. This is global DNS address, right? So looking at this IP address, you can easily find out the first field of this address, which is 8, and if that number 8 falls between 0 to 127 range, then you can call that address as a class A address. Okay, so now, so these are the calculated figures. Okay, there are exceptions as well, we'll discuss about them later, but so if you see a number between 0 to 127, you need to know that this is a class A address. Now if you see the address in the first field between 128 to 191, then that address will fall into class B. For class C, the range is 192 to 223. For class D, it is 224 to 239. For class E, the range is 240 to 255. So friends, these are the ranges that you need to look after in the first field, right? So that basis that range, you will have to just identify the first field and find out the range within which the number falls, and looking at that you can identify the class of the IP address. So these are the first three classes which are used in local area networks and wide area networks. Okay, so and this particular address that we are going to talking about is IP version 4 address. Okay friends, so these are the calculated ranges. Okay, and if you see a number in the first field belonging to any of these ranges, looking at that you can find out if the IP falls under class A, B or C. Let us take an example. I am writing an IP which is well known So this kind of IP addresses you might have come across on your laptop working at home, or maybe in your office network as well. So now if you look at this first field, the first field is 192. So the class C starts with 192. So this is a class C IP address. Okay. 10.2.2.2. If you want to identify the class for this IP address, look at the first field. First field is 10. It falls in between this range. So it is a class A IP address. Okay. And for an example of class B, 172.16.17.1. So this number falls into this range. So that is why this IP is considered as a class B IP. So I hope you understood how the classes in the IPv4 are defined and what are their ranges. Okay, so we will also see the exceptions within this. So for your understanding, 10 cannot be used. This is the world's NID. So this is the first IP address for the entire network. So this cannot be used. 127 is a loopback address. So loopback address cannot be used again. So it can be used, but this will not help you connect to other systems on the network. So the actual range for class A is going to be 1 to 126. So this is the actual range for class A. Class B is going to be the same. Class C again, 192 to 223 is the range. But if you try to use a number from 224 to 255 in the first field of the IP address, your computers will simply not allow. If you try, just open the network settings, right click, go the network adapter, go to properties, and when you open out IPv4 and click on the properties button, there you can see an option to define the IP address on your computer. If you try to put any number like 0 in the first field while assigning the IP address, it will give you a pop-up message and notify that please use a number between 1 to 223. Okay, even if you try to put a number like 224 here, it will still give you a pop-up message to use an address between 1 to 123. So I hope you understood the concept, guys. So IP class D and class E addresses cannot be used on a local computer, right? Cannot be assigned. When I say cannot be assigned, it means it cannot be assigned manually. Okay, dynamically it is possible, and these addresses are used. So you consider multicast addresses, devices used in multicasting, right? Consider it's a Cisco device talking to other Cisco device on the network. So these devices talk to each other on a separate range of IP address. Consider multicasting is happening between these devices. So that's where class D addresses are used. Class C are reserved. Okay, these addresses cannot be used. So one thing you need to understand here is class A, class B and class C are the only addresses which are used in network communication when it comes to configuring the network devices. So friends, yeah, I hope you understood the concept a little better now, right? So now we understood the range, but again there could be a question in your mind that why 0 to 127 only, right? Or why 128 to 191 for class B, or 192 to 223 for class C? Okay, so in the next session we will discuss about why this particular range is set to class A, this range is set to class B. So what is the logic behind using this particular range for class A only? Okay, so let us try to understand this in the upcoming session and talk about the concept of priority bits and how different IP ranges are calculated. So I hope you understood the concept. Thank you for watching.